So I want to kick off really by thanking all of you for being here today. This is our very first future series that we are offering at the D.School. My name is Lisa K. Solomon. I'm a designer in residence at the D.School, where I focus on the intersection of futures thinking, design thinking, and making both of these fabulous practices available, accessible to help us all imagine equitable, just futures. And this series is a part of that, is a part of making the work that so many of you are doing around the world known to one another, to break it down, to allow us all to learn together and to immediately enact it in our communities and to grow our community in the process. I could not be more delighted to be joined by Dr. Lonny Avi Brooks today and Ahmed, who are futurists, who are practitioners, who are producers, who are writers, who are researchers, who are pioneers in this space, every day modeling the practices of imagining new futures. And I'm just so thrilled that we get to do this work together. So thank you, Lonny and Ahmed, for joining us.
Thank you.
It's really exciting.
Thank you.
We are going to dive into what Afrofutures is. We are going to be playing together. We're going to be learning together. But before we do that, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge really the suffering that millions are facing right now around the world and even around in our country in Texas right now. I know that many of us have family there, have friends there, and they're on our minds as we see yet another tragedy of really the future happening to us faster than we wanted to. And in many ways, this future unfolding as a result of decisions that were not made in the past to imagine a future that might have been inevitable. And so I take this as more urgency for us to take futures thinking more seriously and to lean into the importance of imagination and to allow ourselves to understand how the future might unfold, good and bad, and to make bold decisions in the present in order to ensure that we have more sustainable futures, more prosperous futures, more equitable futures ahead. So I think that it is even more urgent that we are doing this work together. Wonderful. Well, let's get started. Lonny, Ahmed, I'm just so thrilled you're here. And what I first want to do is just set some grounding of some principles, because I know we have educators, we have designers, we have futurists. Some may be new to this work, some may be expert in this work. I'm thrilled to see so many people joining us from all over the world, from this country and from different countries. And Lonny, I want to start with you and maybe ask that you could give us just some grounding on Afrofutures, what it is. I know this has been the foundation of your work and research, and just share a little bit about how we can all better understand how to bring it into our lives.
Yeah, great. I mean, and I'm going to say this a little bit better, but later too. Afrofuturism is, at its basic core, combines science fiction and fantasy to re-examine how the future is currently imagined and to envision alternative futures based on the Black experience. But it was coined by Mark Derry in the 1990s, a cultural critic who has basically, given up all claims to the term as it has evolved into a second stage that we call Afrofuturism 2.0. But it's been going on for decades, more formally with W.B. Du Bois and Sun Ra, the jazz musician in the 40s, and his orchestra that's here still today. And through the music and literary art of Samuel Delany, Nnedi Okorafor, George Clinton, it's really about how do we reclaim and rediscover our ancestral knowledge and understand that Black people have always been futurists, and that we had to innovate once we came as slaves to this land, and remake our culture. And one of the things I'll talk about a little bit more later too is just that we took Christianity that was imposed upon us and took the Psalms in the Bible and remade them into spirituals, what scholars call sonic utopias, visions of the future where we're no longer colonized, where we're free. similar to a vision of Wakanda, but it was, called Zion, right? So, and then, so the stage at which Mark Derry coined that term in the mid 90s, it evolved. That's what we call Afrofuturism 1.0. It was more of a art and literary phenomenon. And then in the early 2000s, it became Afrofuturism 2.0. Well, more formally, by 2015, it became Afrofuturism 2.0, where it's more of how do we really celebrate the Black imagination on a regular basis in terms of letting the world know and consolidating our energies together to look at the future more formally. And so that's where we've created the Black Speculative Arts Movement, the Afrofutures podcast, and other genres along with Afrofuturism, like African futurism, Black quantum futurism have evolved too. So Afrofuturism 2.0 is about creating these cultural spaces to celebrate the Black imagination and BIPOC imagination, Black, Indigenous, and people of color imagination, and to also implement these visions into political and legislative agendas. So how do we do that as well? So really looking in and using forecasting, using futures research as a tool to explore Afrofuturism as well, and decolonizing foresight as well. So yeah, that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it, Lonny. I mean, well, I think it speaks to the richness of Afrofuturism and how many disciplines, come into one. And Lonny, I will say I had the just incredible pleasure of feeling what was a masterclass in your work at the Long Now Foundation when you gave an overview of it. And we're going to make that resource and many, many others available because there's so much rich exploration, your research and writing to explore. And I love the collaboration that you created with Ahmed Best, our other speaker. And Ahmed, people know you from many, many different facets of your life. Stomp first in Broadway to being the first CGI character in Star Wars as Jar Jar Binks, to really, I think, collaborating with Lonny and so many others to really liberate imagination as a way of seeing the world and as a way that is integrated with science and technology and all of the disciplines that will allow these futures to come to life. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what excited you to work with Lonny to co-create and launch the Afrofutures podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've always been interested in the future, specifically from the science and technology background, through art. I grew up in a very artistic household. My father's a cinematographer. My mother was a percussionist, painter, jewelry designer. So it was always around. Art was always around. And the tradition of thinking forward and the tradition of really speaking to the infinite, speaking to the eternity of who we are, the ancestral connection, had always been a part of my life because my parents were very much into being African and the idea of African culture intrinsic in the American experience as well. But everything really kind of came together for me when I was like a preteen in middle school, and I just dove into comic books. Comic books was my escape. And one of my biggest influences was, two of my biggest influences was Spider-Man and the Black Panther. Spider-Man was great for me because Peter Parker was a physicist and I loved physics, and he was from Queens, like my mom's from Queens. And the Black Panther had this kind of, Afrotopic place called Wakanda based on this mineral called vibranium. And it just set my imagination on fire. And so I came through this type of thing through like the arts, science fiction, comic books, and so forth, but very, very heavily influenced by technology in emergent sciences. And I didn't hear the term Afrofuturism until much later in like the mid 90s. And then I realized that's probably what I was. But it wasn't really mainstream, like nobody really talked about it. And then I wanted to do something that had to do with media and Afrofuturism. And I didn't know what it was. And so my brother-in-law, who teaches communications at American University in DC, his name is Aram Sinreich, he introduced me to Lonny. And he was like, oh, you got to talk to Lonny Brooks. He's an Afrofuturist. You guys will hit it off, right? So I remember like being in my car in Highland Park in LA and going, let me just give this guy Lonny a call and see if he'd be interested, right? And so I called Lonny. I think I FaceTimed you, right, Lonny? We FaceTimed.
Yeah.
I
Never forget
FaceTimed
that.
Lonny, and I was like, hey, Lonny, my name is Ahmed. And he was like, yeah. And then 2 hours later, I was in my car for 2 hours talking to Lonny on FaceTime. And I said, we shouldn't be the only two enjoying this conversation. This is a podcast. And that's when we started the Afrofutures podcast. It came from that. And then since then, it's 3 years in the running. We have about 20 episodes up. Our latest episode is with the artist Natrice Gaskins, Dr. Natrice Gaskins. She earned the PhD, so I have to say it. Dr. Natrice Gaskins, who does a lot of work with DeepMind and artificial intelligence creating images. And so it's just been such an education. It's been a wonder. It's been phenomenal. And it's turned into this game, AfroRithims from the Future.
Well, that's such a beautiful setup because I very much get that when I listen to the podcast. I get your shared spirit of curiosity, of generosity, of wanting to explore new frontiers in a way that is inviting of others. And I think that is certainly my passion as I've been doing futures work for almost 20 years, is to say, how might we all see ourselves as futurists, and how foundational imagination is to really liberate that possibility and not keep it separate then. So Ahmed, thank you for sharing your origin history into this work. And it's been so extraordinary not only to listen to your podcast that is filled with doctors and technologists and researchers and community builders, and how you model that. And I think if we can all model that already, we are on our way to being futurists. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the collaborations. Lonny, you had mentioned the Black the Black Speculative Arts movement, among others, and how what started out, it sounds like, as a serendipitous conversation of 2 hours has really seeded so many different practices around the world.
Yeah, so part of the origin story around the game is that Ahmed and I discovered this research lab called Dynamic Land. It's on Broadway on 9th Street, and it's about really creating collaboration without a screen over a table, where playable media paper is made into playable media through screens from computers that are overlooking on the ceiling and beaming down onto tables. So I volunteered with Dynamic Land. They had community hours, and I met Eli Kosminsky, the co-designer of our game, and we hit it off. He was a true ally, and we created a demo of the game called Wakandan Future Memories, where if we took the map, because this was in 2018 when the Black Panther had just come out. So we took a map of Wakanda and imagined what alternative future memories you might have in different regions of Wakanda, and it became like a playable. And then we created the card game for the Afrofutures Festival that we did at the Institute for the Future, thanks to the Institute for sponsoring that. And, we created our own kind of on the fly cards about it. And then as we were beginning the game, we had, we wanted Ahmed and our other group, the Fathomers, to join in with us, and Audrey Williams, Alan Clark. And so, Eli and I were speaking about the game, and then Ahmed says, you know what, can I MC this? It's like, yeah. And so he took what was going to be kind of a boring lecture kind of game journey to like, whoa, it's like we just went into Shakespearean African theater, like it was just fun. It became such a joy to play this game. And I'll never forget, one of my students said, I'm thinking about this ancestral tattoo that if you scan it, you get reparations. And I'll never forget Ahmed saying, oh, reparations tattoo? I think you just won the game.
Yeah.
So it just brought this, he brought this energy, of course, all these decades of acting, producing, directing, and just made it into magic. It gave me joy. It put the joy back into futures forecasting for me too. And I combined that with the Black Speculative Arts movement and the continuing evolution of what the Institute for the Future and Long Now do. It just really reinvigorated my spirit, because I was a nerd growing up too. I had Star Trek posters on my wall. I was partially blind as I grew up. And so, technology meant a lot to me. It meant it could augment my senses. So that was really important. I was Geordie in the next generation with the.
Well, I'll tell you what, Lonny, thank you so much for sharing that. What I love about that is that not only were you inventing the future and bringing it to life, but you were really enabling your own capacity to shine through. And I think that's one of the things that's so important. I know we're going to transition to actually playing a game on this webinar. So those of you that thought that you were just here to sit and listen, no, we will be playing very, very soon, because a big part of this game and a big part of this work is the invitation to join in. I mean, I'm always struck when we have something difficult or challenging and we try to get, and we need to get serious, and we cut off that imaginative play, and we cut off the humanity that we need to bring to life, to allow to be spontaneous, to have a bias towards action that you just talked about, to experiment rapidly. These are some of the design principles that we hold very close at the D.school. And we don't practice them enough. And so when we get to a high stakes moment, we're shutting down as opposed to opening up. So I love how the game is really this structured imagination. Lonny, you had a quote in your opening conversation with Ahmed that just struck me, where you said, people are so exhausted in the present. They don't have energy to imagine the future.
That's right.
So part of our job, I think, is to lower the energy it takes to imagine the future and have it be a part of our everyday, and have it be welcomed, and have it be seen as something that has the kind of potential to unleash possibility, rather than, I think, what we've been trained to think of as some of the more linear thinking, or some of the things that end up with numbers versus the things that end up with a reparations tattoo.
Yeah, I think imagination is such a wonderful thing to cultivate. And that's why, like, gamifying this type of futurist thinking is important. A lot of times when we think of games, or we think of science fiction and comic books, we think of escapism, right? We're constantly building things to escape from. And when you escape from, you disconnect yourself from a reality that's possible. So what we're trying to do with AfroRithims is, rather than escape from, we want to create through. And we want to create a way and a means, and use this tool so you can create through what you're going through right now into a future that you can imagine, dream, and make a possibility.
Well, Ahmed, I think that is a perfect tee up to ask Lonny to share a little bit more about the game before we get into playing.
Awesome.
Yes, and this is going to be a fast journey of imagery. So sit back and relax. You may not, get everything in right away, but don't worry about it. It's just a journey that we're going to begin together right now. So let's do it and set the context for this. And here we go. So I'm just going to tee this up. And this is our Afro-Rithms, Afrofuturism journey. And we really are trying to create and democratize anti-racist futures. And this is our great logo by Alan Clark, local artist in Oakland. I just love that, hands up in the air, democratize the future. And for a quick second, I want to call out a land and reparations acknowledgement that we are on sacred or lonely land here in the East Bay, in the Bay Area, and call for reparations to recompense Black people for what they're owed. But again, the idea of Afro-Rithms from the future, that term Afro-Rithms really comes out of that we're surrounded by algorithms in our social media and computing platforms. And, Sophia Noble wrote this great book called Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism. So, if you put in the why are Black women so, you come up with all these stereotypes. And so the idea is, how can we shift the gaze of our algorithms to have more of us in them, to have a more Afrocentric perspective, a more Black, Indigenous, and people of color perspective in them, to really infuse algorithms and a future artificial intelligence with African soul, So I love this picture of this woman who owns a horse ranch in Richmond and riding her horse during the protest last March on Broadway Avenue in Oakland. She's marching into the future where Black futures matter, and that's just so, I feel so much pride when I see that picture. And the idea of this term astro-blackness is really important, because the rise of astro-blackness is a person's black state of consciousness released from the confining and crippling slave or colonial mentality, who becomes aware of the multitude and varied possibilities and probabilities within the universe. And that's a quote from the Reverend Andrew Rollins, who contributed to our Afrofuturism 2.0, The Rise of Astro-Blackness. To go back to what Afrofuturism is, imagine a world, the alien world, of reframing the Middle Passage of how slavery began, how Black people came to the Americas. Imagine West Africa as the homeworld of the Black diaspora, who, with the latest in bondage technologies, modern technology, were taken to a new world and killed if they spoke their languages or practiced their religions or their spirituality, or played their music. So they had to reinvent and readapt, reclaim, and transform their trauma. And that's what Afrofuturism aims to do, is to reclaim and transform the trauma of past atrocities against the Black and Afro-queer diaspora. So they took Psalms from Christianity and transformed them into spirituals, right? What scholars call sonic utopias, to see a world. And those spirituals then evolve into rap, hip hop, jazz, the blues. I said that in the wrong order, but you get the picture. But this is what Afrofuturism again tries to do: combine science fiction and fantasy to re-examine how the future is currently imagined and to envision alternative futures based on the Black experience. And this again is the slave ship, and packed with slaves chained together. So our real vibranium are the spirituals as sonic utopias, visions of liberation. And it's a cultural worldview for interrogating Eurocentric motifs. It's also about radical Black art as a future's window, as signals of the future. So there's this fantastic exhibition in 2015. Please go to it if you can. It's still online, the brochure. It's called Unveiling Visions, The Alchemy of the Black Imagination. And this particular painting by Menzel Bowman is called Mind Blown. And I love how it, inverts how we've been so brutalized as Black people, and then shows the expansion of our minds into the universe, right? And this exhibition gave birth to the Black speculative arts movement, which was co-curated and co-founded by Ronaldo Anderson and John Jennings. And, this idea of tracing the Black fantastic is really listening to the minor key sensibilities generated from the experiences of the underground. I love this quote by Richard Eiton. There's this term I coined called future types, tracing the circulating science fiction capital that's filled with promises of the future that can simultaneously constrain and unleash our imaginations. Afro-future types are Black signals of the future that find and reclaim traces of Black cultural visions alongside erasures of those signals. It's about finding the undiscovered stories that W.B. Du Bois talked about with his tool he called the megascope in 1908, with his stories of the Princess Steel. It's about recognizing the Tulsa, Oklahoma neighborhood of the Black Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa that was bombed to the ground in 1921 because of a trumped up charge against a Black man assaulting a white woman. This neighborhood was bombed from the air and obliterated, with its survivors marched off to a concentration camp. But we do have the Black Panther legacies that rise in the 60s, along with Martin Luther King. But they have these 10 principles that we would see today as not quite so radical. Reparations, universal healthcare, universal education, against the incarceration of Black people, for a universal income. So basically, it all comes down to honoring and leveraging our ancestral resources, honoring what we call the mothership, coming back and imagining that mothership surrounding us with love and Black joy. And that's what I love. These paintings, again, are from, Menzel Bowman and other examples of Paul Lewin, too, and Stacey Robinson's work for our issue of When is Wakanda in the Journal of Future Studies by Stacey Robinson. and curating the end of the world. It's an ongoing exhibition going on right now. Black Panther Territory by Tarika Lewis. The time is now. And our Afrofutures podcast. Take a look at that, showcasing diverse ideas of the future. And creating responsible community engagement, design, imagination, deploying anti-racist digital goods tools for good, from the Civil Rights Act from 1964 to civil rights actions now. BIPOC futures matter. So visualizing alternative memories of the future as what we call cognitive prosthetics, experiential futures that Jake Dunnigan and Stuart Candy pioneer to heal ourselves and to heal others. That's Natrice Goskin's work right there. So let's do it. Let's play the game. What time horizon do you see? Become the seer, the time traveler, or the librarian, the keeper of knowledge from 2030 to 2040 to 2054 and beyond. So let's take that journey right now. Let's play the game. Okay, here we go.
All right. So we have selected a bunch of friends and new friends who are going to play with us.
Yeah, I'm always excited after Lonny's intro. I'm ready to run out and run a marathon after I hear every time he talks. It doesn't get old. It just never gets old. So if we could have our players on screen, if possible, right now, I'd love to see you guys, because we're going to start playing Afro-Rithms from the future. And like I said, this is a way to create through to the possible future that you want to live in. So let's do it. Let's do the tool. All right, I see one person, Manasai. Let me go. There you are. There you are. How are you? I would love for all of you to, right now, unmute and say something, anything that comes to your mind right now. You can say it all at the same time. You can say it one after another. Just say something. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
I just love everybody, just the collective cacophony of consciousness. Just bring it. Just bring it. All right, here we go. Let's go to our first slide. The first thing we do in Afro-Rithms from the future is we pick a tension card, right? These tension cards are going to help form the multiverse in which we will place our world. The tension cards that we have today are decolonizing, magic, hip hop, Black leadership, queer, civic duty. The players, we get to pick two. Once we pick those two tension cards, we put them on our Kalunga lines, which you'll see in the next slide, and we can define each tension card as per this community that we have on screen, right? So let us choose. In the chat, there is a straw poll, right? And we can choose the two tension cards that speak to you today. All right, that's our straw poll. So pick those two cards. Can we put the tension cards back up on the screen if you need to see what they are? Decolonizing, Black leadership, magic, queer, tension, civic duty. Two cards. Pick two. Pick two. In the chat, for the people who are watching, who are not playing on screen, pick two cards. Tell us what you think. You can put your cards in the chat. And if you are in the chat in the world and you're not on screen, tell us what you think those cards mean to you in the chat. All right, here we go. Decolonizing is getting up there, 27%. And magic. Wow. Ooh, people are loving the magic. I like the magic card. We haven't really played the magic card. Decolonize and queer on the chat. That looks cool. Magic and hip hop. I think they're one and the same, right? According to like Grandmaster Flash. All right, backstage, how much time do we have for more picking? It looks like we're getting our top two here. Decolonizing and magic are looking good. What does it look like? And then from this, I like this. Cabello says Black leadership and civic duty, two of things we always need more of. Decolonizing and magic. All right, I am going to close the polling in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the polling. What do we have at the top? Let us pick our top two. Our top two are decolonizing and magic. Okay, let's go to our map of the multiverse. This is our multiverse, and these are our Kalunga lines. Now, as the game seer, I get to guide you, but as the game librarian, Lonny gets to give you some context in what we're doing. So, Kalunga lines, Lonny, give us a little bit of context on what that is.
Yeah, it comes out of the Congo cosmogram that's based in the Congo in West Africa. And it's the Kalunga line means the turn in the path, a crossroads. And it's this indelible concept in the Black diasporic and African world, the point of intersection between the ancestors and the living where new possibilities emerge. So it's our ancestral futures to leverage our ancestral knowledge for the future.
Right. This is our transition when we go from this world into the world we are about to create. Okay. So let's put our tensions in there. Magic, we go from the least possible to the most possible magic. Decolonizing from the least decolonizing and the most possible decolonizing. But we have to define what these terms mean to us, this community. So I would love for someone to tell me, one of our people on screen, what decolonizing means to you. Do not be shy. Unmute and start talking. And then the person who talks, I'm zero in on. Just unmute and start talking. Everybody, decolonizing. What does it mean?
It means reclaiming cultural erasure.
Noor. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for playing with us. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually joining from my ancestral homeland, which I usually join from the unceded territory of the Mansi, Lenape, and Canarsie people. So this is my first time playing the game from my ancestral homeland. And I have to acknowledge, since we're talking about decolonizing, that I'm joining from a man that for over 800 years has been subject to occupation and colonization.
Yes.
And so, and has been, the borders crossed us, we didn't cross the borders. So I say, today I'm joining from Amman, but really my ancestral homeland is 5 different nation states.
Right.
Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. So decolonizing is bringing, for me, the cultural erasure that has been so systemic and telling a different story and bringing back the ancestral wisdom.
What is that ancestral wisdom? If you were to try to codify that entire idea of ancestral wisdom, what would that be for where you're from? And in the terms of decolonizing, what do you want to bring back?
I want to bring back language. I think the language of the, there's so much fear around speaking our mother tongues, and there's so much wisdom in our language. My name is Noor, which is non-gendered. It's a non-gendered name. Like it's so, it's from the future, really. And so I want to bring back, especially as also a US citizen, I feel that I feel a lot of, there's a lot of fear when I speak Arabic. I feel it in people's bodies, you know? So I want to live in a future where not only do I speak Arabic freely, but people want to speak Arabic too.
Language. I love that. The decolonization of language, bringing back indigenous forms of communication, right? Indigenous forms of oneness, bringing people together through the language. What else does decolonizing mean? Someone else. That was beautiful. No, I felt that deep into my soul. That was gorgeous. Who else? Please, more ideas, more decolonizing. What does it mean?
Think of it as a combination of going back to the past, but also starting from scratch. Entirely.
What do you mean by starting from scratch, Nelly? And thank you for being here.
So I'm from Ghana, and I had the pleasure of bringing an African-American friend to Ghana with me during the year of the return. Mm-hmm. And it's her realization that I'm bringing here of she was seeing where she came from as going back from the past, but realizing that because of everything that happened, right, in terms of history and being brought over, there's an opportunity to ground yourself in that, but know that there is a new land, a new future you can create with everything that happened. So it doesn't necessarily mean entirely going back to the past and recreating everything that happened. It means a new opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think it's, I think you're really speaking to something that is very African American, right? Because we've been so diluted from where we came from. There's this sort of just ambiguous foundation for us to stand on, right? As opposed to folks who have immigrated to the United States, there's a very strong foundation of where they're from, right? I'm from Italy, from this, neighborhood in Sicily. I am even from, Africans who have immigrated. I am from Ghana. I know my grandparents are from Ghana. As Americans of African descent in the diaspora, and as Caribbean Americans, I don't think Caribbean Americans have this as much. My father's family is Caribbean, and they are very much Caribbean people will always tell you where they're from, regardless of where you are, and regardless of whether you asked or not. It's like, back home, it's always back home. But there's this intrinsic foundation of knowing that you have this incredible continent behind you that gives you this courage, this strength, right? So I think that foundational knowledge in decolonization is something that's incredibly strong, right? When you're colonized, they try to move you away from what that ancestral strength is, right? So that foundational strength is so incredibly important, right? I think that speaks to what Nora was saying as well, like the language is part of that foundational strength, right? So when you decolonize, you are really giving back the foundational strength of those that have been colonized, right? It's beautiful. It's wonderful. One more decolonization, and then we'll move to magic.
I wanted to add to what Nora said about language. I think I want to really just like double plus one on that, because language holds the idiosyncrasies of culture. And so when you lose your language, or when it's stripped from you, you also lose the connection to your culture. And it's a big part of identity. Yes. And I think like that's a big part of erasure. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Beautiful. Let's move on to magic. Let's talk about some magic. We've got magic to do just for you. So what does magic mean in this world that you want to create? What is a world of magic, without trying to sound like David Copperfield? Like, what is that? What is this world of magic?
Manasa. My name is Manasa. So speaking of language.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so that was said in Telugu. For me, magic is inside out, right? Like if I think about the intersection too of decolonization and magic, we have everything we need in us. It's just the world that is consistently telling us that we don't. And so magic to me is in those moments of presence, of realizing a little bit about what Nora said and Miriam, as well as Nelly, of where we come from, who we are, and the strength and the power and magic in that.
That's beautiful. The internal spirit of how we operate, of who we are, that's magical. That's a beautiful way to describe what magic is. More magic. Can we get one more magic?
I would describe that as imagination unbound. And you had that piece earlier about stereotypes and how algorithms reinforce that. And my opinion is magic allows you to do things beyond those stereotypes, but only limited to the things that you can actually imagine.
Right. So it's this manifestation of pure creativity.
Yes, sir.
I love that. Kwaku, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I go by Kwaku, but Kwaku or Kweku, whatever works.
Well, whatever honors you is what I'm going to say. Kwaku. Thank you for being here, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think we have our universe, right? And now let's go back to our multiverse map, right? In the multiverse map, now we have to choose, and please put it in the chat if you can, most decolonization, most possible decolonization, and most possible magic, or anywhere in between. Now, here's the caveat to this. Most people think that utopia is 5-5, right? There's this ultimate idea of magic and this ultimate idea of decolonizing, but that is not always the case, right? Sometimes most possible magic can remove us from the possibilities of what might be detrimental about that, right? So I urge you as the seer to think economically and choose where in the world we want our world to be, right? In this multiverse. And then we're going to start building stuff. We're going to start making stuff. So in the chat, if you can put 5 being the most on each one being the least, where in the universe is our decolonizing magical world? I like doing this when I say magic for some reason. My hands do this. It's like a prestidigitating in the Zoom world. All right, put it in the chat. Is it either 2 to 4, 4 to 5, 3 to 5, 4 to 4? Decolonizing 5, 2 magic. That's from Jody. Ooh, 2 magic. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I like some magic in my world.
I would love some magic in my world, especially if it's the magic that Kwaku is talking about. This idea to completely imagine and bring to life. I like 4-4 from Nina. Hi, Nina.
Yeah.
All right, we have a bunch of 4-5s. 3-4, 3-4, 5-4, 4-4, 4-3 from Makeda. That's interesting. 5-4. All right, did all of our panelists vote? Are we still thinking? Give me a thumbs up if you did, so I can look through the chat and see who voted. Ariam, Noor, Kwaku, Nelly, did you vote yet? Oh, Nelly is deep in thought.
I have a question.
Go.
Does most possible decolonizing also mean removing the entire history of it?
Ah, now there is a good question. Now we're playing the game. Does it? That's why I say, like, sometimes picking the most isn't the best, right? Because if we forget about what colonization has done to us, are we doomed to repeat it? Will we enact it upon another system? It might not be even human beings. We might do it to our food. We might do it to our spaces. So 5-5 isn't always utopia, right? That's what makes this interesting. We get to figure these things out. We get to talk about these things. That's why, as your seer, I am only your guide. Choose wisely. And then we can
ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
If we replace the words decolonize with indigenize, would you have the same answer?
That's a good question as well.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Really good. We can explore that in the artifacts that we build as well, because I love that indigenous. I'm gonna use that on Twitter later today, and I'll credit you, Noor.
Yeah.
I'll get you 10%. Okay. Here we are. I think we've all voted, yes? We have all voted. Awesome. And so let us look. 3-3, 4-3. Oh, there's a 4-3. There's a 5-5. There's a 3-3. Decolonizing 3. Magic 4. All right. So I think we've landed on a really good one. So we're going to go decolonizing 4. Magic 3. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Now, we are going to build things. We are going to create artifacts for our world. And these artifacts are going to populate the world. And from these artifacts, we are going to choose an obelisk that we are going to send out into the multiverse that is going to represent who we are. And we'll figure that our obelisk out later. But right now, we have to build things that will popularize our world, right? And what we do to do that, right? You take an inspiration card, you take a systems card, you take an objects card, and you smash them together and you create a thing, right? So you use the inspirations and you smash it with a system, or use the inspirations and you just smash it with an object. And then we have, dun, 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 our wild seed card. Right? Our wild seed card, if you all are familiar with Octavia Butler, is your personal inspiration. What is inspiring you today that we can build and move into the future? What's inspiring you to, that's the wild seed card. Now, you can only use the wild seed card once in a community. So don't everybody go running for the wild seed card, because you're going to take the wild seed card away from the rest of the community. So only use it if you need it. Okay? So you take an inspiration, you smash it either with a system or an object, and you put something in the world as an artifact. Okay? You can choose either a system or an object, whatever you're feeling, whatever's happening in the moment, right? We're building the future. We're using now to build the future tomorrow, right? Okay, so mothership is an inspiration. Bio-augmentation is an inspiration, right? Systems, education, and public transportation. Objects, sports, interesting, and library. Now, every artifact we build has to represent our world of a really large deal of decolonization, right? And middle of the ground magic, right? Decolonizing meaning building strong foundations, right? Meaning language democracy, right? Magic meaning creative, internal, personal ideation and creation, right? So let's build some stuff. And please, everybody who's playing in the chat, throw some artifacts in there, right? Let us hear what you have to say in the chat, right? Find an inspiration and either pair it with a system or an object, or I think people in the chat, you guys can liberally use the wild seed card since you're in the unknown, diaspora of Afro-Rithms. But everybody on screen, you only get one per community. One per community. So throw a hand up if you have an artifact, and let's talk about it. I love that. Nina had a great artifact. Mothership Sonic Blast that gives secrets from the past that heal and restore ancestral memories. That's beautiful. Well done, Nina. That's a fantastic artifact, right? She took Mothership, right? And what did Nina put it in the chat? What were your two inspirations? Inspiration was Mothership and what else was it? Education. Wonderful. So if anyone has any questions on how to build artifacts, that's a really good example of how to do it, right? She took Mothership and she took education and she created this Mothership Sonic Blast that gives secrets from the past that heal and restore ancestral memories, right? I think that's an incredible amount of decolonization and the sonic blast of magic that's gifting everyone with ancestral information, ancestral education, and things to bring on. Anybody in our community? Oh, okay. Manasa. Is that correct? Please. Manasa. Accent on the first syllable. Manasa.
Exactly. I appreciate that. So I can put 2 or 3? 2.
Put as many as you want. It's Thursday. Why not?
All right, cool. I will put as many as you want. Mothership Education Library. I'm imagining a library to me has always felt like the place I could be home or my most self. So
already loving it.
Imagine a mothership or a place, so library and mothership together that amorphizes. So based on when you enter, it becomes the educational place that you need or the magical place you need to remember the history before and imagine where you could go. So it changes and shifts.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Say it one more time, Manasa. Please say it one more time because it was beautiful.
So imagine a library as a place of magic, which for me in today's world, that feels that way. But as you walk in, so it's a mothership, meaning it takes you back to where you come from and who you are. And it gives you all the tools in whatever shape or amorphizing space that means to you to build forward. So what inspired this, and I have to say it, is Tomi Adeniyi's Children of Blood and Bone. Because when they walk into that library, it is like the visuals that came to mind were for me this place where you hear songs, magic is spurting from every which way, and there is color. There's so much color.
It's a library that contains an ancestral murmuration. So the library shifts and moves in an egalitarian system that gives you exactly what you need and the information that you need that's personal to you. Wonderful.
Wow.
Wonderful. The Ancestral Murmuration Mothership Library. Ancestral Murmuration Mothership Library, the AMMML.
I feel the healing. I feel the healing coming on. Oh my God.
I would like to go to there now. Please. I've been locked in this room with these ladies this whole time. I would love some Ancestral Murmuration Library. That was beautiful. All right, more artifacts. We got that. The AMML. We got the AMML. More artifacts. Who's got one? Who's got one? Kwaku.
How'd you know? Are you reading my mind?
Yes, I'm in the murmuration. I'm in the murmuration.
All right, this is just a side note. The more you talk, the more you're taking me back to Jar Jar Binks, and I'm having a special moment around that. I just had to be honest about that. I just love that. Okay.
Why, thank you.
This is the artifact. It's not fully thought out, but it involves bio-augmentation and public transportation and library. And so it would be a bus or a train, and as you ride it through certain areas, it allows you to connect to the ancestral people who walked those spaces before you, where you would actually feel their strengths and weaknesses tied to the struggles that they would have had, whether it be around collecting food or even organizing as tribes, whatever that may be.
It's an ancestral empathy
express.
The Ancestral Empathy Express. You guys, you're blowing me away right now. I'm speechless. That is fantastic. That is beautiful. That is gorgeous. Ancestral empathy. I think it embodies everything that is wonderful about what we're talking about in this world, this magic and this decolonization, right? The ability to walk in the footsteps of those that came before you and feel how they felt, right? And when you build that empathy, when you build those feelings, when you know how they felt, it's very difficult to create a system of oppression, right? Because you are connected to those people, right? It's like the mycelium of the community. Go ahead, Lonny, what do you have to say?
Yeah, the mycelium, the mother trees that talk to each other too, you know, and I have a tagline to advertise your thing as Mothership Vibes gets you to where you want to go, you know, empathically. So thank you.
That's Ancestral Empathy Express.
That's inspired by the fact that I used to live in Memphis, and I would drive past the sign that said the Trail of Tears every day when I dropped my kid off at daycare. But I would always feel disconnected from it. I would be sitting at a traffic light and seeing the sign, but I wouldn't necessarily feel connected to what the sign was supposed to represent.
Wow. That is incredibly impactful. Thank you, Kwaku. I really appreciate that. I love the Ancestral Empathy Express. It's gorgeous. We got one more. We got one more artifact. One more artifact. Okay, Roman, go.
I'm thinking of this is bioaugmentation combined with education. Sorry, I'm just moving my microphone up. And I'm thinking of some kind of memory enhancement device which reveals the legacies that I have inherited, but I've psychologically denied.
Wow.
And I'm sort of thinking something very particular in my own life where a few years ago, I suddenly realized that what had made it possible for me to walk into my high school when I was 11 years old in the suburbs of Sydney in Australia was the fact that the lands had been stolen from the indigenous population. Yeah. And it had never occurred to me that I'd always thought that the reason I was able to walk through those doors was because my father, who was a refugee from Poland, had struggled from nothing to sort of launch me into the middle classes of Sydney suburbia. But what I hadn't seen was that legacy right? And when I suddenly saw it, it was like a flash. So if I could access those flash moments of psychological denial, and something in this world could enable it, that would be liberating me in multiple ways.
That's wonderful. What were your two cards? Bioaugmentation and what was the other one?
And education, I guess.
And education, right? So it's this ability to instantly receive the lessons from colonization. I think this is wonderful of why decolonization is at a 4, right? Because understanding and knowing how decolonization liberates you, right? Even that moment, Roman, of what you're talking about, of realizing it, right? I walked into this school and I realized why I'm here. Immediately, that freed you, right? That liberated you, and it gave you the ability to start thinking different. It gave you the ability to feel, gave you the ability to recognize your fellow earthling and what they've gone through. So I think that's wonderful. It's just how can we amalgamate that? How can we put that into something? Bio-augmentation and education. It's almost like a doorway when you walk through, right? It's an ancestral doorway, an ancestral empathy doorway, an ancestral
it's the doorway of denial. It's sort of an opening.
I love it.
Of that somehow.
There it is. Yeah. It's the doorway of denial. The doorway of denial. It's those unconscious biases that we sometimes take on ourselves, and the awakening of those unconscious biases. Yeah, that's beautiful. The doorway of denial. Put that down. Okay. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we have to choose an obelisk. And this always happens every time we play the game. We're just getting to the good stuff, and then we have to end. So our community up here and our community on the chat, please choose one of the artifacts that we have created and choose it as an obelisk to send out into the multiverse to represent us, right? Okay, so our obelisk, it's either the AMML, the Ancestral Memoration Mothership Library, right? The empathy, the Ancestral Empathy Express, or the Doorway of Denial, right? So go to our straw poll and choose the AMML, the AEE, or the DD, Doorway to Denial. Choose, 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 choose. We got to vote. I'm running out of time. The AMML has got 48%. Oh, what? I love this part. I always feel like I'm like a CNN anchor on election night every time this thing happens, and I'm moving around the big iPad. Bio-augmentation. The Ancestral Empathy Express has jumped up, or an auctioneer. And in the library, mothership, one of those. All right, we're going to close the voting at 10-9. 876 5 4 3 2 1. Oh, that last 1 second got a couple of votes, and that pushed the Ancestral Memoration Mothership Library is our obelisk. That is what is going to represent our world. That is what we're going to put into the omniverse, the multiverse, to represent who we are in this community, and that is how we are going to build the future. Thank you all so much for playing Afro-Rithms from the Future. One comment: why do we do this? Why do we do this game? Why do we make this a game? And I'll tell you why I believe in it. Since it is Black History Month, Dr. Martin Luther King made popular this statement: the aftermath of nonviolence is the beloved community. And the reason why that's been resonating with me so much, especially when we play this game, is what are we trying to build when we build the future? We are trying to build the beloved community. What does that community look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? How do we think? How do we speak? How do we talk? We get to design that. Afrofuturism in its history gives us the ability to create gentle, emergent systems. And the reason why those systems are gentle and emergent is because it follows the natural laws of nature. And when you go against the laws of nature, you build oppressive systems. African history, African civilization, Afrofuturist thinking helps everyone design these gentle emergent systems. And using that, we can build the beloved community. And that's why we play this game. Thank you all so very much. And I'm going to throw it back to Lisa.
Oh my gosh, Ahmed, Lonny, thank you. I think we're all hanging on. And as we close out, I just want you to take a moment. How do you feel right now? I mean, our panelists, we need to thank you for participating, but all of you that contributed so magnificently to bring this community of strangers. Some of you knew each other, but we were not a community an hour ago, to life. How did we do that? Through play, through imagination, by opening up, by allowing ourselves to take on different roles, the seer, the librarian, the connector. This was extraordinary. There is so much for all of us to take away from this. Lonny, Ahmed, Fathomers behind the scenes, making these polls happen. Lacey, Chanello, thank you, thank you. Ariel, keeping us on time. It's amazing what can happen in an hour. What's going to happen from here? What imaginations are you going to think of when you walk outside, when you have a conversation? This is the fodder. This is the work of futurists. And this is the work that we all can do. So as I said, we are going to load you up with a lot of resources to explore. I want to end with one final quote that comes from one of the resources that Lonny wrote about in the power of game jams to bring new ideas to life. And he says, the epic win forms the pathway to rewire our minds, to reframe and diminish the deliberating aspects of cruelty that constrains us, and to allow all of us to achieve futures we didn't even know that we could bring to life. So I want to thank you all so much for playing. We have more future series to come. So our next one is going to be in just 2 weeks from now. With Leah Zadie, award-winning futurist, who is also on the call, will be joining us to talk more about the pluralverse. So you're not going to want to miss that. We'll make sure the link is in the sign up and it's on our events page. And we'll be followed after that with one in April with our dear friends from Resistance Communications to again explore how we bring inclusive futures to life by honoring our past. So I want to end here. Thank you so much. We will have this recording. We are going to share this chat, and we are going to find ways to bring these beautiful ideas to life. So with that, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today.